Hello, and welcome to Games That Don't Suck, a gaming retrospective in the Shea Hates Everything Podcast family. My name is Kyle. I'll be your host today, and I am, of course, joined by my brother Shea. Welcome, Shea.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
I'm 8 years old today.
I guess I'm 4. I didn't know we were going to do this bit. I had to do some quick math.
Yeah, we're not going to do the whole podcast that way, but for the sake of nostalgia, I'm 8 years old.
Yeah, oh, that's wild.
Don't be mean to me, internet.
Oh, well, you're in the wrong place. Games That Don't Suck is a series where we look back at some of gaming's highest highs. Each episode, we focus on a particular year in gaming, arguing about what the top 5 games of each year should be. And that's what we're going to be doing today. And this month, we're investigating and debating the games of 1996. So we have talked about the worst games, the games that suck the most of 96.
Correct. Yes.
Which, that was a lot of fun. Y'all should check out that podcast if you have not yet. But today, it's a little bit more of a positive tint on things. And we have quite a few games to talk about. What is it, like 14, 16?
I think it's 16, maybe 15 games.
Holy smokes. So, the way this works, Shea and I have gone through the Wikipedia page for game releases in 1996. We have ferreted out any that were like Japan-only releases or whatever, and we've nominated games for what we're calling the long list, and that's our 16 games for today. We're going to talk about each of those games in turn, and then we're going to, maybe during the process of that talking, we'll decide that we don't want to nominate things further up, but as we go through that list, we'll come up with a short list, which ideally is less than 16 games. And then we'll start cutting, arguing, jockeying for position on the short list, and finally come up with our top 5. So that's how we do it over here in this particular podcast family. Come on down. Sit at the table. Grab a bite to eat. It's buffet style, baby.
Yeah. Pull up a plastic inflatable chair of, color of your choosing.
Yeah.
Crack open a Mountain Dew. Open up the bag of Doritos. Let's talk about some PlayStation 1, N64 era games, man.
And we're starting off with a banger.
Do we want to do the little honorable mentions first?
Oh, yeah. Let's do that. That's a great idea. So we have some games, like we didn't play every game that released in 1996, and we haven't even played every good game that released in 1996. So a couple of honorable mentions here before we get into things, just so people aren't like, hey, where is this game? Why wasn't it on your list? Super Mario RPG. Neither you or I have played that. I have, since the recording of the previous podcast, I have ordered a sort of like a dock thing for my Switch. It's like a mobile dock, a handheld dock that makes the Switch look like a GameCube. It has Hall effect sensor sticks, so there's no fucking stick drift. I have 3 pairs of Joy-Cons with stick drift, which is why I don't play my shitty Switch. But I'm going to make my Switch not shitty, and then I'm going to get the remake of the Super Mario RPG, and I'm going to play it. So unfortunately, that did not happen in time for this podcast, where I could maybe weigh in on this game. However, stay tuned later down the road. We can readdress that. I'll talk about it on the next flagship pod.
I don't know that that's fair because you're playing a remade version of that game.
That's also
true.
Because
I did play some of the new Super Mario RPG.
Okay.
I've put 4-ish hours. I didn't like it.
Oh.
And so that's part of the problem is I today and you potentially in the future are playing a game that came out almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, we have no nostalgia for it.
Yeah, and so to me, playing it now, it looks cute and the personality's kind of fun, but gameplay wise, it is the most bare bones turn-based RPG you can imagine.
I see.
And I did not have a good time with it. So I don't know that you're going to get something out of it playing it today. That is not a fair bias to bring to a game on a list like this, because a lot of what we're doing here is nostalgia based. So
you're
right. Had I played the original and loved it and then played the remake and not had fun with it, I don't think that reflects poorly on the original. but that's why we're putting it in this honorable mentions, is because neither of us have played the actual original Super Mario RPG.
Yeah, and we know that it is beloved by a lot of folks.
Yes.
Another game beloved by a lot of folks that we haven't played, Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall. This is like I have always wanted to load it up and just see what it is, and I've just never pulled the trigger on it. I love all of the Elder Scrolls games that I have played. I have not played the first couple, so I cannot speak authoritatively on that game, so we can't talk about it.
Oh yeah, it's so different than any of the Elder Scrolls games you or I have played. That it's hard to draw any comparisons between like Oblivion and Daggerfall. Like they're completely different games.
Yeah, even Morrowind and Daggerfall are
totally
hugely different. So those are honorable mentions this month, just in case people were curious about where those were, especially knowing that, Shea, you love Nintendo franchises. I used to love Nintendo franchises, and I played a lot of their games. We both love Elder Scrolls. So in case people were curious, that's why they're not on the list. Backstepping into our family dinner metaphor, we're starting off with a banger. These are the hot wings on the buffet of games, and that's fucking Crash Bandicoot, bro. Like, Crash Bandicoot is the hot wings of the dinner table.
Okay. Maybe it will make sense once you assign food metaphors to the rest of these games, which now you have to do. So good luck coming up with 14 more. Because I'm not tracking chicken wings as Crash Bandicoot.
Because chicken wings are great and Crash Bandicoot is great.
Yeah, okay, sure.
That was as deep as my...
That's as deep as it went.
That was as deep as it went.
Crash Bandicoot famously considered the chicken wings of PlayStation
1996.
Yeah.
Developed by Naughty Dog, published by Sony Computer Entertainment. It's currently sitting at a Metacritic of 85%, but that's a user score. Pulled up an old IGN GameSpot reviews. Those came in at 8 out of 10s, respectively. Crash Bandicoot is one of the first games on PlayStation that I beat. As a youngin', I did not often beat video games. They tended to be games of this era tended to like have wildly skewed difficulty in certain parts, and so they're really hard to beat. I actually beat,
including Crash Bandicoot.
Yes, including Crash Bandicoot. This is one that I did actually manage to beat. I really enjoyed the switching of the perspective. So sometimes it's side scrolling, sometimes in a mission it's like a little more 3D, like the boss fight, where you're like jumping on the platforms. Sometimes it's like an on rails runner going away from the camera in the Hog Wild, or running towards the camera in the boulders, levels.
Those are brutal, man.
Those are totally brutal.
That's rote
memorization.
Yeah, old school punishing gameplay design. That's just like it's impossible to do unless you memorize it. Right. Like there's no skill, very little skill involved in those sections.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, talking about Super Mario RPG, one thing that is a little bit difficult for me about Crash Bandicoot is having replayed the like updated versions in the last couple of years. Whatever it was, it was Crash Bandicoot 4. It wasn't the original. But playing Crash Bandicoot 4, which is the same game, right? Like it's essentially the same type of gameplay design. I did not have fun. Like my tastes have changed drastically since those days.
Sure, yeah.
So it's like it's hard for me to love as Crash Bandicoot as much now as I know I did then. But boy, I know I loved all of the Crash games back in the day.
Oh, for sure. That may be my most played PlayStation 1 game is Crash Bandicoot. Just trying to get through it, man. Neo Cortex, son of a bitch.
He's a real dick.
Yeah, it is, man. Like it had great art, even for 3D. Like the environments were great. It was very evocative. The music was terrific. It had all those like little secrets you could find throughout the levels that like kept you looking and engaged. There's like a lot of weird, like the tribal mask dude. Like he's like your shields for when you take damage.
Yeah.
Picking up, I think they mangoes? Is that what they were?
I don't know,
Whatever
dude.
they were.
Some kind of funky
fruit. Yeah, and like the secret levels where there would be like the hot Bandicoot, the hot chick Bandicoot, and you'd like do a level for her or whatever every now and then. Yeah, what a strange game. Very of its time, but like it had some secret sauce in there. Like everything was working together really well. The art, the gameplay, the music, a little secrets and stuff. It tripped all the things in my brain that young Kyle
it was like
were excited by.
The like classic bringing the mascot platformer, like bringing that into 3D in a polygonal way. Like this was, there's another game that we're going to talk later on that did something similar, but it like in terms of like a straightforward mascot platformer, this was it felt so new and cool and fresh. Like being able to be in this, it's barely a 3D environment, but a 3D environment nonetheless. And it had that like mid-90s attitude to it, where it wasn't like grungy style, but it was kind of like, cringy, but like a little bit of an attitude character, a little bit goofy. It totally appealed to, young kids like us.
Yes, absolutely. 90s kids.
Yeah.
Kids,
kids who grew technically up I'm an 80s kid, yeah.
Right.
I would never consider myself an actual 80s kid. They're wump of fruit. That's
wump of fruit, of course. Yeah. How could I forget? So that's Crash. Crash rules. I'm sure we'll be talking about it again on this podcast at some point.
Yeah. Crash Bandicoot should stay on the short list.
It should. Let's type it in to make it official. All right. Die Hard Trilogy is next. This is maybe my second most played game on the PlayStation 1 was Die Hard Trilogy.
I know. We used to sit in front of the TV and hand off the controller between levels or deaths and stuff. We played a ton of this game.
I am surprised Mom and Dad
we had never seen the movie.
No, we had never
seen the movie.
We had no idea it was attached to a movie. I'm very surprised Mom and Dad let us play this one because it is really violent.
Yes.
So it has, it's a trilogy in the 3 games. It's Die Hard, Die Hard 2, Die Harder, and Die Hard with a Vengeance, the adaptation video games of those films. The first Die Hard one, it's a third-person shooter. You're in Nakatomi Plaza, and you're, like, having to go up each floor of Nakatomi Plaza, I think before, like, a timer runs out, because it's, like, wired to explode. And it's like a really bad third-person shooter, but even for the time, I think it was pretty rough. But something about it being in this package of 3 games made it more exciting. Because Die Hard 2, Die Harder, it was an on-rail shooter that you could play with a light gun. And it's in the airport from the second movie. And it's just like on rails, going through the airport, shooting enemies. Again, I've talked about it before. I really like the Time Crisis games. This was it was scratching that itch for like Time Crisis light gun stuff.
Yeah.
And we had that purple PSX light gun.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, if you know, you know. If you don't, but it's this big looking like alien gun, like blaster that is bright purple. And with like red buttons on the side and stuff for like start and select and turbo and all that. And you can just plug it right into your PSX and shoot some terrorists, dude, because that's a little awkward. But, they're like Russian terrorists, which, we're still...
Yeah.
We still don't like those.
But again, this was the 90s. This was still like Cold War era hate.
Yes. Yeah.
Like anyone from Eastern Europe, like we Americans hated you in the 90s. Like from like the 50s on. It wasn't until the early 2000s that terrorism became Middle Eastern racism. It was always like Russian, Eastern European racism.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know if you would agree. I feel like the second game is the one.
Yeah.
Like that's the one I have strong memories, which I guess you didn't talk about Die Hard with a Vengeance, but that was a little bit more not mini gamey, but like it was more set piece oriented, where you're like it's like a car driving.
Yeah, you're like driving a
combat-y
taxi
game.
or something.
Yeah. But the second one is the one that I know we played a ton of because we liked the light gun stuff was cool for us.
Oh yeah, it was like having an arcade in your home.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
It wasn't like that at all, but it felt like that.
It felt like that at the time. Yes, to our young brains. So I guess I didn't do all the setup. So it was developed by Probe Entertainment, published by Fox Interactive. It has a game ranking score of 86, which is very good. A 74 on Metacritic user score, and GameSpot gave it a 9.4 out of 10 when it came out. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, those are some good scores. People like the Die Hard trilogy.
It's just weird because, like, look, I have a lot of nostalgia for the Die Hard trilogy, in particular the second game. I don't know that I would say it's that good.
Yeah,
if I'm being real,
I'm interested. Like, I wonder if it's about the package deal, right? If it's about maybe having where because this is also a time where volume, like more meant good, and so
bang for your buck, man.
Right? Totally. And so I wonder if that's a part of those scores as well.
Yeah, it could be.
Who could say? I guess we could if we had actually looked at the review and not just the score. Next up,
we're not here to talk about other people's opinions unless it suits our argument.
Yeah, precisely. Next up is Duke Nukem 3D. This released for
what are we doing with the Die Hard trilogy? Are we keeping it or are we cutting it?
I think it stays.
Do you?
Dude, I thought yes.
Okay.
I care about the Die Hard trilogy.
Okay. Yeah. I guess this to me is just nostalgia. Like, I don't know that I would say it's a great game. Like, I don't know that I would say it's one of the 5 best games of 1996. We just played a ton of it as kids.
I have a hidden goal to get a light gun game on one of these top 5s. I will not be stopped.
Well, it's going to be tough sledding for you because I'm not a huge light gun person.
I care about it a lot, so it stays for now and will probably die hard later. Yeah,
it's not going to die hard. It's going to die pretty easy.
Okay. Duke Nukem 3D for MS-DOS. This was developed by 3D Realms, published by FormGen. This has a game rankings of 88.5 and an 80 on Metacritic, so it's even higher than the Die Hard trilogy. This is, again, going back to the attitude of the 90s and it really resonating with people. That it was taking Doom and Quake and games like that and just putting that attitude all over it.
Yes.
Obviously, none of that stuff plays well anymore, but for the time, it was very much what people were into and what excited people, especially kids. And because it felt like you were like, it's like seeing a rated R movie before you were old enough to like feeling that you're getting away with something, being exposed to something that you're too young for, and that excitement of breaking and like hopping those barriers. Duke Nukem 3D had all that stuff in spades, and frankly, it's a good one of those. It's a good one of those early sprite-based first-person shooters. Yeah, I just Duke Nukem 3D is really cool. It's a shame they tried to bring Duke Nukem back in 2010. It's a damn shame they did that because they shouldn't have. It's like trying to bring back Austin Powers. You shouldn't do it.
He's a product of his time.
Yeah.
He belongs in the 90s. He should have stayed in the 90s.
Yes.
Yeah, even like I haven't played Duke Nukem. I don't think I've ever played a Duke Nukem game. And like even at the time as a kid, like that personality didn't appeal to me. Like it felt like, bullying was not a huge part of my childhood experience, but it felt like bullies would like this game.
Sure.
And that made it unappealing to me.
Yeah, I can see that. It'd feel like they would feel vindicated by...
Yeah, like represented by this, douchebag meathead guy.
Right. Yeah.
And not that I like cared about the objectification of women when I was like 9, but like it just never appealed to me. I just wasn't into that style of attitude. I liked the Crash Bandicoot style of attitude, like the fun-loving, over-the-top, goofy, like the Sonic. Like I liked that type of personality, not the like bro.
Yeah, not the guy who's too old for this shit to be acting that way. Like, Duke Nukem's too fucking old to be acting the way he acts. Yes. Yeah. I don't think...
You're an adult.
Yeah, exactly. You are causing problems. I don't think Duke sticks around, which is for the best. We should leave Duke in the past.
Probably not the last time you're going to hear Duke Nukem on a podcast, but probably the last time you're going to hear it on a Games That Don't Suck podcast.
Yeah, probably. All right, moving on. House of the Dead. This was, at the time, exclusively an arcade game, which is where I first played it. It was developed by Sega AM1 and published by Sega, and has a game rankings of 70. Again, with the light gun games... Everyone just listen, just quiet down and listen to me talk about some light gun games for a little bit. It'll be over before you know it. This was one of my early exposure to like zombies, because it wasn't huge in fiction back then the way that it is today. It hadn't been popularized as much. You had like Dawn of the Dead and stuff like that, but that were kind of like niche cult hit horror movies. But this was one of my first exposures to zombies, was House of the Dead in the arcade. And just the magic of it being in that setting at that time, everything in an arcade, it's so stimulating and heightening, and heightened, that I have a lot of nostalgia for this particular machine. If I were to have a home wherein I could put arcade machines one day, House of the Dead would absolutely be one of the games that I would try and find. Because I do have a lot of fond memories of it. I don't know that it's one of the best light gun games there is, but again, as one of my first light gun games and exposure to zombies, which is a trope that I'm very much into still to this day, it's important for me. House of the Dead is. I don't remember how good of a game it actually is.
Yeah, I would say I have similar feelings about it. Like, I really enjoyed the game playing at the arcade, but it was like one of many light gun games that you'd play at the arcade. I do remember always gravitating towards it, because like the shooting felt good, and like shooting zombies and stuff was a fun thing to do. But it doesn't feel differentiated in my mind from any other type of game like that.
Yeah. As such, I think I'm okay with leaving it off the short list.
Okay. Because
like I said, it's important to me as like, my origin story as a super gamer. But I really just don't remember how good it is, if it is at all. So that I think keeps it from being on the short list. Next up, we have Jet Moto on the PlayStation. This was developed by Sony Interactive Studios America and Single Track, and published by Sony Computer Entertainment. Has a game rankings of 78.9 and an 8.4 on the Metacritic user scale. I'm sorry, that's probably an 84, not 8.4. Jet Moto, because there are a couple games like this on this list. Well, and maybe one other game like this on this list. This is my gold standard for those games. And I think it's all about the fantastical elements of it. Like how you're racing this imaginary, like it's not a motorcycle, it's not a jet ski, it's not it's like a floating, flying vehicle.
Yeah, it's like a hover.
Yeah, like a hover bike.
A hover ski bike.
Yeah. and like you go around those pylons and you magnetize to them and like go back around it. And I just really liked the courses in it. I thought the music was great. And I liked the design because there was one Jet Moto bike that looked like a Mountain Dew can. And I was all about that. Like the bright green one. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And I always wanted to pick that one because of Mountain Dew. And I was like insanely crazed about Mountain Dew as a child because it like
and as an adult.
Yeah, until very recently. Man, I still love Mountain Dew. I just can't let myself have it. But that was Jet Moto in a nutshell for me. Was just like it felt like everything about this racing game was like taken up to the next level. And I will concede, maybe it didn't control all that well.
Yeah, that's
maybe it's a little wild.
There's another game we'll get to here that I think is a good head-to-head comparison with Jet Moto, and that's like the number one thing I would put against Jet Moto is the controls were not the best.
Right.
A lot of racing games of this era, that was a challenge. Like, it was hard to translate what historically had been an arcade-like experience with, you know, much more sophisticated behind-the-scenes game stuff happening, but also a different type of controller. And to put it just, like, in your hand, it just didn't translate with the D-pad and the sticks and stuff like that.
Right. So I don't know, man. I don't know if we keep Jet Moto around because I have a feeling it's going to lose to that other one.
Yeah, it will, in my opinion. And you having not played the other or not having an affinity for it makes it hard to like head to head.
Yeah.
If you're in love
I'll trust
with this
what you
game,
say about the other one.
Yeah.
In that you say that it is better. I believe you. I have a lot of fondness for Jet Moto, and like that's carried through time or whatever. But I do also remember that it didn't feel that great to play. So there is a caveat already.
Yeah, another like pro I would put for Jet Moto is just the variety in like the tracks.
Yeah, they're all
stuff.
very
like,
different.
And it's because it has that like futuristic sort of hovercraft that they can do a lot of cool things with it.
Like one was in like a cyberpunk post-industrial city, like a weird. Yeah, that was a cool track.
That stuff I really enjoyed. But yeah, I would say there are two games that are really close to each other, and both of them are not going to make the top 5. And I don't know that the other one is going to make the top 5 either, so I would say it's probably okay to cut Jet Moto.
Yeah, okay. Tell me about this next one.
Yeah, here's a game that will make the top 5. It's not similar to Jet Moto, but sort of in the same family, which is Mario Kart 64. Developed and published by Nintendo. This has an 87 on game rankings. So I think the thing that is a little bit difficult about Mario Kart 64 is how different it felt, or how different it feels from like the way we think of modern Mario Kart.
Yeah.
Because it was so much more simplified. But at the time, like, it was mind blowing, man. Like the 3D environments and all the different characters and the multiplayer and just playing stuff on the N64 in that way is just so cool. I mean, the fact that there were 8 characters in this game is like nothing. But at the time, it was really cool to pick and choose your favorites. You know,
and they all played the same
too,
which was really cool at the time.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a huge fan, really, of the Mario Kart series in general. I love most of the Mario Kart games, but Mario Kart 64, I think, is one of the best. I wouldn't say that it is the best, but it is one of the best, and that's because it, really is what put the series on the map compared to Super Mario Kart, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I would say Mario Kart 64 is my second favorite Mario Kart. And
to Double Dash?
Yeah.
Is Double Dash the number 1?
Yeah,
Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, fucking is, dude. That's right.
I'm a huge fan of Mario Kart 8. That I would put at number 2.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about 8. I never really clicked with me. I think maybe 8 has hit me in a time when I'm kind of waning with my Nintendo interest, and so I think that's a part of it. But like Double Dash was at the height of my Nintendo interest. But yeah, Mario Kart 64 is a tremendous video game. I've had a lot of fun playing it over my life.
The battle mode was super fun.
Yeah,
and
right.
it was much more simple compared to. I mean, and that's one of the things that made it so great was like the primary mode just being the 3 balloons mode. Like that, the simplicity of it is what made it appealing. In subsequent games, they tried to add all these other different types of multiplayer games that were just less fun. But focusing on like that main competitive mode, I thought was super fun.
For sure. Yes, absolutely. So we can move that one on up.
Yes, it stays.
Mario Kart 64. Alrighty. Moving on to a game that won't be making it. But I wanted to talk about it because nobody remembers this game, but I do. And that's Math Blaster, Episode 1, The Search for Spot. This was for Windows, developed by Davidson and Associates, so you know it's a real video game. And also published by them. So it's an education game that has like a couple of different mini games in it. Well, like 3 or 4 different mini games in it, if I remember correctly. And there's like a little bit of a narrative where you're looking for Spot. But the main thrust of it is you're solving math problems in order to progress in the mini games. And as a kid, I loved math. I really enjoyed the idea.
Nerd.
I know. I really enjoyed. It was very satisfying for me. It's like once you understand how to solve a thing, I would just do math problems like all day. Like Mom would buy me a book of math problems over the summer, and I would just do that for fun. And Math Blaster, obviously, encapsulating that in a video game was like way up my alley. That being said, it is an education video game, so there's not a lot to it. I just have a lot of fond memories, and when I saw it on the list, I was like, you, there, Math Blaster, yes, finally, someone remembers it exists. Thank you, Wikipedia. Because, I don't know, maybe the listeners at home remember Math Blaster, but that one hit me right in the feels, because I remember it quite fondly. But it's not going to be in the top 5 games of this year, so.
That's fair.
Yeah. So the last of the M's is Metal Slug for the PlayStation X. This was developed by Nazca Corporation and published by SNK, and has a game rankings of only 68, unfortunately. I put Metal Slug on here. I know it's not a wonderful, amazing game, but there were a lot of things as a kid about it that I really appreciated. So the first Metal Slug, it's very much like a Contra-like, side-scrolling, like kind of like a run and gun, where you're just trying to like get through a level pretty quickly. You're getting power-ups and new guns and stuff, and enemies are dropping power-ups and all that. But the thing that set it apart from other games like that for me was the art. I loved the Metal Slug art. That kind of like chibi, punky art style, like tech punk. It just had a really unique visual style to it. I don't remember much about the music, but I remember like being kind of in awe of the graphics. It just the amount of all of the places look so different. And there's like a lot of motion in the environments as well, like flowing water and all these effects and stuff going on in the background. I just thought Metal Slug was really rad. I don't know. Did you ever play it?
No, I mean, I have seen the game and like been around it at arcades and whatnot. It reminds me of it's like what we're talking about with Duke Nukem, not in terms of personality, but in terms of like look. It's like that approach, a Duke Nukem approach to Mega Man. That's how it looks to me.
Yeah, a little bit. I could see that.
Like it's a very American War version of like this futuristic Japanese thing that Mega Man has going on.
Yes. A Japanese take on American War.
Yeah, exactly. Very over the top, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Giant muscle dudes, everything is brown.
Yeah.
Tanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of metal everywhere, which I guess is the name of the game. But yeah, Metal Slug is super cool.
You're killing slugs, you know.
No. Did you play it? Okay. But you know what? I'm excited about that Metal Slug's Tactics game that's coming out. Maybe never, because they announced it like forever ago. But that game looks cool. Metal Slug, I don't think it sticks around, but is a very neat game. And the start of something great. I know, like, people have a lot of affinity for the later Metal Slug games. I don't know if that extends to the first one or not, but I definitely, that art style has stuck with me for sure.
Yeah. I can't believe I didn't make this comparison earlier, but it's kind of like a Contra light. Like, it doesn't have the same level of difficulty. It's got more of a kid-friendly visual aesthetic to it compared to something like Contra, but it's very similar in at least in that era of gameplay.
Right, for sure. Ooh. What about this next one?
Moving on to the next one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about Quake.
Oh, man.
Quake comes from id, published by GT Interactive, game rankings of 93.
Whew.
Widely hailed as one of the best video games ever made. I think Quake is difficult for us. I know you have not played
I have
Quake.
never played the first Quake. I have played subsequent Quakes and really liked those, but I've never played the first one.
I played Quake like when I was in high school over at a friend's house on his PC. So I played it like 8 years after it came out.
Okay.
So it's hard for me to like have the same frame of reference for how mind-blowing it was at the time.
Yeah.
Because people are coming off of Doom, which was like the first big first-person shooter that was like ultra-violent and it had that attitude to it. Quake brought Doom into like actually 3D rendered environments.
Right.
It's still very similar in how it looks, but it looks more 3D.
Okay.
And then the biggest part of Quake, because I feel like the single-player part of it, it's very fun. There's no story. You're just killing monsters. It's very similar to Doom. But the biggest thing about Quake was the multiplayer.
Yeah.
Like, Doom made online multiplayer a thing. Quake, like, made it like this will be a thing forever.
Yeah, the Quake multiplayer is the thing that like jump-started the industry interest in creating multiplayer modes, because this was the first one that saw like real numbers, real success across the board, and like infrastructure being built around playing this game. Like, people were buying products and tech and gear just to like get servers going and doing crazy shit just to play this game together. It was really big on college campuses, I know that much. Like,
well, it was like it's got like the fast twitchy, you move around so fast and everyone's got a rocket launcher, and like it was such a, like, for the time it was an environment created for like crazy things that you told your friends about the next day that you were able to pull off, and like all of the hijinks that would happen in a multiplayer match. Like, I have really fond memory. Like, for me, the touchstone game for me was Unreal Tournament, and that game was like completely inspired by Quake.
Right.
Quake was the originator of those like big multiplayer competitive multiplayer, just insane speed of movement, like the bunny hopping, strafe jumping, like all the like vernacular that everybody had, all traces back to Quake. And I think that that's phenomenal. I think it's just tough because, like, I don't have a personal affiliation with it, and you haven't played it.
Right.
So that's my only difficulty with trying to see it continue on. I do think it's super fun, but that's like the best thing I can say about it. That is my direct experience.
Sure. I feel like if I had played this as a kid around when it came out, I would not have had fun with it because I would have just been getting fucking destroyed.
Oh, well, sure. But that's part of the fun.
Sure, yeah.
Because, like, unless you're like an MLG legit player, everyone is getting murdered every 10 seconds. That's the whole point of the game.
Yeah.
But you're doing just as much murdering as you are getting murdered.
Fair. Yeah.
So yeah, I think Quake is awesome. I feel very confident that, like, if you or I or both of us had been into it when it came out, it would be a top 5 game. I don't think it is for our list.
Right. I have way more stuff on here that I'm interested in talking about.
Yeah, that's part of it too, is like, overall, this year it doesn't feel as strong as, like, we just did 1995 a couple of months ago. Like this overall, I don't have as many games I'm passionate about. And so for a second I was like, maybe Quake does make sense. But even looking at the rest of the games we have yet to talk about, I would take at least a couple of them over Quake already. So
okay, yeah. Sorry, Quake.
It's awesome.
It's awesome. Don't feel bad.
Yeah.
This next one is also really awesome. It's the first Resident Evil game for the PlayStation 1. It's developed and published by Capcom. Has a game rankings of 80, which seems low. Has a 91 on Metacritic, which seems correct. Talk about... I talked about House of the Dead and, like, the zombie fervor and stuff like that, introducing me to the concept of zombies. Resident Evil cemented it in my brain that zombies are one of my favorite things of all time, especially in games. That first Resident Evil is an incredible video game. It's so good. And it's gotten a lot of love and a lot of great treatment over the years. Like that remake on GameCube is fantastic. I've beaten the first Resident Evil. I think I've only beaten it twice, but I've played it like 5 times. And like this is everyone makes the mansion in any game. Like in Minecraft, someone's made the Resident Evil mansion. It's like a game. It's a thing that shows up in other games. And then also, like, how many horror games have you played that are in a mansion? That would not be the case if not for Resident Evil. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, this is the era of touchstone games.
Yes,
because like we talked about that. That's why we started with the year that we did when we went all the way back to this like transition to 3D, because it was such. Like, that was not necessarily like the biggest innovation that gaming has seen, but as a player of video games, and especially the age we were at that time, that's when video games like blew up.
For sure.
And so it's so easy to say, yet again, it's such a touchstone experience in video games, the first Resident Evil. That's why you continue to see it popping up in other games and other mediums and things like that, because everybody knows the mansion from Resident Evil.
For sure. And if the first Resident Evil never came out, I would not have gotten my favorite game of all time, which is Resident Evil 4.
Right. Yeah, the only, like, we should keep Resident Evil for sure.
Thank you.
I only struggle with it because I just don't think that it's aged well. Like, it made the actual, like, 3D movement in a space better than maybe any other game until that point. There's another game we're going to talk about in just a bit here that also did that 3D movement in a 3D space, and that game failed hardcore at making that feel good. It's good for other reasons, but like Resident Evil made it feel good in quotations for the time period.
Right.
I just don't think it holds up whatsoever. I think it feels incredibly awkward to play. And so that's the only difficulty that I have. I'm not holding that bias against it because we're not talking about like a modern context, but so many of these other games are still playable and fun today. And I personally don't think that Resident Evil is fun to play anymore.
I would disagree, because like the GameCube re-release, I think it's a GameCube re-release, they had the option to switch to non-tank controls.
Right.
And it just wasn't right. Like I don't know if they just
the game was
I don't know if they just did a
way.
bad job at doing that or whatever, and they didn't accommodate that
It's
things.
Possible.
But
they
designed it feels right to play at tank controls.
Sure. No, I don't disagree with that. I think the game it's right to play the game with tank controls. I just don't think the tank controls play well in general.
Okay.
I definitely wouldn't say that putting actual like 360 movement and aiming into Resident Evil would make it better, because they designed the game that way.
Right.
They designed the combat encounters and the exploration around, like that's what builds the tension is the tank controls. And so taking those away like removes a huge aspect of the game. It's purely for me like the way that it feels even at the time was not my favorite thing. But I get it. I know I'm in the minority on that. I get it.
Okay. As long as you get it.
Oh, I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it.
All right, Resident Evil's up there on the short list. This next one.
Yeah.
I don't think this one makes the list personally.
Just a little game that no one really cares that much about.
Yeah.
Super Mario 64. Developed and published by Nintendo. 96 on Game Rankings. Is that the highest? I think that's the highest one. Yes, it is.
It's almost the highest score you can get.
Yeah, it's pretty close. I don't know. What can we say about Super Mario 64?
People are so Nintendo pilled.
Gross.
No, dude, Super Mario 64 is fucking incredible.
Yeah.
All right, so much time spent at friends' houses playing that. Because, again, we did not have a Nintendo 64 growing up, so most of our exposure to those games happened at friends' houses and stuff, but so much time was spent at friends' houses playing that game, trying to ferret out all its little secrets. Just a terrific fucking video game.
Yeah.
Like, full of so many fun characters that have gone on throughout the franchise. So many memorable encounters and levels, terrific music, like for its time, like really impressive 3D controls and navigation and freedom of movement. A lot of like so many animations, so many options of things you can like. You climb trees and shit, like so many things.
Even
you could do.
like the way that they were able to make the platforming feel good blows my mind because it had never really been done. And watching it, I mean, if you aren't a big gamer today, because obviously people that play video games in 3D were used to this, but at the time, or like show your partner that doesn't play games, and if they watch the gameplay, they're like, how do you know where you're gonna land? Like, it doesn't feel like it would make sense, but they tuned it so well that the like hyper specific accurate platforming from the side scrollers transitioned so well into 3D.
Yeah.
And it I don't know how they did it. I mean, they're just smarter than us at Nintendo. Like, they're just better than other game studios at making stuff feel easy to pick up and play. Yeah, I mean, the level variety and the goofiness and all of the secrets and even just the structure of the game, having like the hub world with all these like,
that was really novel too.
It was such a smart and, in hindsight, like obvious innovation on the world structure of the side-scrolling games that it makes sense. It makes sense, and it still felt so unique and innovative at the time because it was. I mean, I was just for fun looking up my top 100 games of all time, which, to be fair, hasn't been updated in a couple of years, but Super Mario 64 is at 13.
Damn.
And I say that's probably low compared to a lot of people in their opinions. I have Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario World above Mario 64.
That feels right.
That's pretty fucking crazy to have 3 Mario games in the top 13 games of all time. But it just shows how ubiquitous the Mario series has been.
Right.
But yeah, Super Mario 64 is extremely good and should be on our short list.
Don't worry, I already put it there.
Next on the list, Tomb Raider, which came out on PlayStation 1. This was developed by Core Design and published by Eidos Interactive. Has a game rankings of 91.6.
That's way higher. I was surprised.
By.
Way higher than I thought.
And I think, again, it speaks to the freshness of 3D movement in a 3D space. So this is the game I was referencing when we were talking about Resident Evil, where I don't feel like they did it right in Tomb Raider. Like, the movement feels way more stilted than Resident Evil, which is a game that has like tank control, aiming and shooting.
Right.
There is mobile aiming and shooting in Tomb Raider, and it still feels very stilted. To me, like, the coolness of Tomb Raider was the acrobatic movement of Lara Croft, the insanity of like fighting a T-Rex and shooting tigers.
The animation is so good. on
Yeah,
Lara
absolutely.
only.
Right. And like just the bombastic action story and set pieces and things I think is all really cool.
She was also like one
I
of the more realistic looking polygonal character models we had seen
for what it's worth
at that time.
yes. Realistic, maybe not in body shape,
Yeah,
but in
number of polygons and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now the
pyramid
environments
boobs.
then suffered a bit because of it. Like it's very difficult to figure out where you need to go in those environments with the graphical style. All the textures kind of blend together. They weren't savvy enough at the time to like highlight ledges and stuff like that. It just wasn't a thing that was done yet. So it was very difficult to navigate your way through those areas, and that became the challenge, was figure out where to go.
Especially in like the underwater sections.
Oh, dude, oof.
Brutal.
Totally brutal. I will say Tomb Raider Trilogy just got an HD re-release, remaster, relatively not that long ago, a couple weeks or so. People are really enjoying it, it seems like. So I would be interested to go back and see how I feel about the controls now. But I mean, even just purely talking like nostalgia wise, like first playing it, I remember really struggling with those controls a lot.
Yes. The coolest part of the controls was shooting the double pistols, doing like sideways flips, because it auto locks onto things, right, which is how they're able to get away with that. That was like the highlight. Pretty much anything else felt like garbage.
It also ran at like 15 frames a second.
Yeah. Not terribly unique for the time period.
No. But that did make it more difficult as well.
Yeah. I have fond memories of Tomb Raider. I think it's worthy to be in this discussion. Yeah. I do not think it should move on.
I agree. Also, again, very nostalgic for it. A lot of fond memories. Am interested in going back to it at some point, but yeah, it does not need to stick around. Following that up, Twisted Metal 2.
Hell yeah.
So this is our Games That Don't Suck 1995. We talked about the first Twisted Metal. We were conflating a lot of the things in that first Twisted Metal with things that are actually in Twisted Metal 2, which is a much better video game than the first one. Twisted Metal 2 fucking rules, dude.
I was refreshing my memory because of that specific experience of us like mixing up those two games, and I feel like most people like the first game more. Not that they think the second game isn't good, but like what I have seen is a lot of people like the first one the most.
Interesting.
And that surprises me. Yeah. Because I definitely like Twisted Metal 2 the most.
Yeah, I agree. So this one was developed by Sony Interactive Studios America and Single Track, which, if you're paying attention, is also who made Jet Moto, and published by Sony Computer Entertainment. This is a game rankings of 86. Yeah, I just can't say enough good things about Twisted Metal 2. Like, this is the one with the, like, different stages around the world, the Eiffel Tower, all those iconic levels. This is Axel, right? Was this Axel's? Yeah, he's on the cover. Yeah.
Yes.
Fuck, I love Axel.
Yes.
Damn.
Great character.
Twisted Metal 2 is good. Just so much fun.
Oh, funny. I'm on the Wikipedia page. Twisted Metal 2 was a runner-up for EGM's Action Game of the Year behind the Die Hard Trilogy.
Oh, interesting. Huh. That's funny.
Yeah.
What? Huh.
But I personally would definitely say Twisted Metal 2 is better than the Die Hard Trilogy.
Yeah, you know what? I think so too.
But yeah, this was where they did like more of the globe spanning stuff. It still had the same just stupid attitude in like the music and like stupid in the best possible way. I love Twisted Metal 2. I think that the biggest benefit or the biggest like pro in Twisted Metal 2 was the different types of environments that you're fighting in was just more interesting in that way.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I don't have a ton of memories of like other big differences between the games other than some of the characters.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite roster of
the
Twisted Metal games. I think there are some levels that I prefer, like in Twisted Metal 4, I think, but I like all of the levels in Twisted Metal 2. I think for that reason, it's probably my favorite out of all of them. So Twisted Metal 2 sticking around?
Yes.
Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. All right. These last two, numbers 15 and 16, take us through them.
It's 14 and 15 because we cut Super Mario RPG.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
So Wave Race 64, this is the other game we're kind of briefly referencing when we're talking about Jet Moto, because I feel like, not that they're the exact same game, but they're pretty similar. I definitely think Wave Race is better than Jet Moto, mostly because of how it feels. The movement and the accuracy and like the specificity of the movement in a racing game like this is so much more important compared to something like Mario Kart 64, which is a little more like arcadey.
Right.
Not that Wave Race is like a sim by any means, but the whole point in the game is like, in order to go fast, you have to bob and weave around different colored buoys, and if you miss, you lose some speed, and if you miss enough times, like, you automatically fail. And so having that ability to go over the waves and time out things in between the buoys, and like the feeling of it was so important. And I thought Wave Race super nailed it. The biggest part that was fun to me, you mentioned the like Mountain Dew uniform in Jet Moto, but in Wave Race it was about the tricks that you could do over the waves and
right.
like
the
jumps and stuff like that. That's what made it feel really cool to me. I loved Wave Race. I would keep it. I'm curious because we've got Mario Kart 64 on here already. I've got another racing game to chat about. Certainly not going to keep all three. So probably not even two. I mean, if you throw Twisted Metal 2 in the mix, that's a lot of like vehicle-oriented games.
That's true.
So let me chat about Wipeout XL.
Okay, well, really quick, Wave Race 64. Did you do the setup? Developed by?
Probably not.
Okay, developed by and published by Nintendo. Game rankings of 90.6, which is very high.
Yep. And then the last game is Wipeout XL, which is developed by Psygnosis and also published by Psygnosis, and that has a 94.8 on game rankings.
Man, that's
which
high.
Is also extremely high. Yeah, I think the biggest thing to say about Wipeout XL, so we talked about the first Wipeout in the 1995 games that don't suck. It didn't make it into the top 5. I might have even cut it before the short list just because I know you hadn't played it, Kyle. I would push harder for XL because it basically just improves everything from the first game. The soundtrack is more varied. It still slaps. Like, the soundtrack is like one of the best parts of the game. The movement is the biggest improvement. That was one of the difficulties of the first game. Again, because this is the era of taking arcade games and putting them in the palm of your hand.
Right.
Like, that was a criticism of the first game, was that it felt a little bit loosey-goosey. And they really tightened it up in XL, where it so captures that like F-Zero speed of movement while still feeling like you're in control of your vehicle, and it's not just like going crazy and you're gonna ram into walls over and over again.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that Wipeout XL is like one of the best pure racing games in my opinion ever. I don't know. It's tough though.
Yeah,
because I know you haven't played it.
Between Wave Race and Wipeout, which one would you rather nominate to the short list?
I absolutely think Wipeout is better than Wave Race, but Wave Race is more analogous to your love of Jet Moto, so I'm kind of in between from that perspective.
Yeah.
I guess in fairness, like, Wave Race is similar to Jet Moto, but it's not the same game, so it's not like you would push for Wave Race because of that. So I for my money, I would keep Wipeout, and my only thing is, like, I would prefer to keep Wipeout if it can make the top 5, because the first one didn't. Like, if this game's not going to make the top 5, then I would rather keep Wave Race. If that's going to have a better shot, like, if you're going to care more.
Oh my god.
But I definitely, let's keep Wipeout, because I definitely think it's a better game than Wave Race.
All right, Wipeout XL. Hey,
Wave Race is really fun though, man. Wave Race is really good.
I believe you. A 90.6 is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, we've got 7 games. Yeah, it wouldn't make it. It wouldn't make it.
Yeah.
That's tough. It's really fun.
All right. It is time. It is that time in the podcast where we list off our short list, and then we're going to start making some more cuts, doing some ordering, some horse trading.
Yep.
Our short list, as it stands right now, is Crash Bandicoot, the Hard Trilogy, Mario Kart 64, Resident Evil, Super Mario 64, Twisted Metal 2, and Wipeout XL.
So I'm doing something in the doc,
Okay.
which is highlighting a couple of games that are definitely going to make the top 5. Do you disagree with any of those?
No.
So the 3 games that I have highlighted are Mario Kart 64, Super Mario 64, and Twisted Metal 2.
Yeah.
Those 3 games are definitely going to make our top 5. So I only do that as a means of saying between the other 4 games, we're shooting for 2 spots.
Yeah. Shoot.
Between Crash Bandicoot, Hard Trilogy, Resident Evil, and Wipeout XL. So already to me, I feel like the answer is obvious, which is Crash and Resident Evil should move on, Hard and Wipeout should go, which really frustrates me because I really think Wipeout should make it, but like I would put Wipeout above Crash.
Interesting.
But I feel like you're probably not going to go there. I would put it above Resident Evil, but I know you have a really strong attachment to Resident Evil.
Yeah, I will fight tooth and nail for that first Resident Evil.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine.
Anything else I'm up to discuss.
I'm totally happy to have Resident Evil make the top 5, given how much you love it and all that good stuff.
All right.
I would put Wipeout above Crash. Part of it is I feel like it's aged better. I just think it's a better tuned, like it's the feel of it is better tuned. But I'm not gonna sneeze at just the fun and stupid attitude of Crash Bandicoot. Like I love that game too. So given that you've never played Wipeout, it probably makes sense for Crash to be the 5th one.
Yeah, I'm looking at screenshots of Wipeout XL.
You got to see it in motion.
I know, yeah. I don't love the look of it. The kind of like desaturated look of it.
Yeah, it's a very... I mean, there have been other versions more recently, I think, that like lean more heavily into the modern take on what a future looks like with all the neons and shit.
Right.
But at the time, this was a little bit more... I mean, it was definitely a futuristic aesthetic, but it was more muted. It was more realistic. Right.
I do like you can see your little character model on the back of that thing. You can see your little dude hanging on. It does remind me a lot of F-Zero, and yes. I know I don't like F-Zero.
Yeah. Well, we're not here to talk shit about Wipeout, a game you haven't played. So I don't care about you thinking it might be like another game you don't like. I already said we should keep Crash, okay?
Okay.
Don't crap on Wipeout.
Okay. All right.
That bums me out because
I'm bummed about Hard Trilogy.
There are very few racing games that I care about whatsoever, and Wipeout is one of the few, and to have neither of them make the top 5 is a bummer, but I get it.
Yeah, I mean, look at the company it's in. It's just not fair.
The biggest problem is you just don't play good video games.
Oh my god.
Look,
I have played 5 of the top 5 best video games of 1996, Shay.
Fair enough.
And so far, that list is Crash Bandicoot, Mario Kart 64, Resident Evil, Super Mario 64, and Twisted Metal 2. I feel.
Do you want me to give you the order? Because this is the order. Do you want me to give it to you?
No. Hold on. So
and we can get out of here.
Why do you always do this at the end?
Because it's obvious.
But okay, so we brought in Crash last, which I think tells me, yeah, Crash is number 5. Do you agree?
Yes. Again, I would put Crash over Resident Evil, but that's the only game I would put it over, and it feels like it shouldn't go over Resident Evil.
Right. I'm good with Resident Evil at 4.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then we have our top 3. Mario Kart 64, Super Mario 64, and Twisted Metal 2. I like Twisted Metal 2 more than either of those Mario games.
Damn. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
No, that's not happening, but interesting.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was 50% of the voting committee here.
It's not a vote. It's an argument session,
I know.
I'm gonna win.
Oh, okay.
No, it is. But we can definitely agree. I like Twisted Metal 2 more than Mario Kart 64.
Okay.
So regardless, Mario Kart 64 should be number 3.
Okay.
Which is a great spot for it. That game rules. Twisted Metal 2 is better.
Yes.
Twisted Metal 2 is not the best game that came out in 1996.
Oh, but it's so good.
It is. It is so good. It is so good, in fact, that it's the number 2 game of 1996.
See,
the original Twisted Metal was number 4 in 95. So it's not only are we celebrating the sequel, we're saying it, even by comparison, is significantly better than the original game, which was already an amazing top 5 game. But we're not getting crazy.
I've fallen
here, Kyle.
so out of love with character platformers, and I think it's because of the oversaturation of Nintendo's catalog that I've kind of burnt out on them.
Yeah,
and then also, all of the other people in the fringes trying to emulate what they were doing, and it became overly saturated.
I don't disagree.
I'm trying not to hold that against Super Mario 64 right now.
Yeah, like there have been hundreds of good character action platformers. There are so many great 3D platforming games. We've got another one, like somewhat of a platforming game in Crash Bandicoot. I mean, it is, but it's very different than Mario.
Yeah.
Super Mario 64. But the point is, there are so many great platformers, and even still, Super Mario 64 is one of the best, and not one of the best like it's in the top 15-20%. It's one of the best, like literally one of the best, like the 3rd or 4th best platformer ever made. And I get it. I totally get the malaise for Nintendo and specifically for Mario.
Yeah.
I don't have that malaise, right? Like
I
loved, like, Super Mario Odyssey. I loved Super Mario Galaxy is like one of my top 5-6 favorite games ever made. But yeah, Super Mario 64 it's in another category from the rest of the games on this list.
See, and like part of why I've gotten that new Switch accessory and like am diving back into the Switch catalog is because I don't want to be the guy who hates Nintendo anymore. It's not a fun guy to be because nobody agrees with me. And that's not fun when nobody agrees with you. It's fun if you can find like at least a couple people who are like, yeah, you're onto something. Nobody agrees with me. So sure, let's give it to Super Mario 64.
Ew, don't say it like that. Does it like, fine, I'm giving up.
I am, though.
Horrible attitude.
No. Your arguments make sense. I am not gonna win in a head-to-head with that argument. Because
like
my only argument is don't like now. Don't like now right. Though. And the reason we're doing this podcast is because not now, but then.
Yeah, it's true.
And I did like it a lot then. So I'm good with it. We have our list. And
this is a good list.
This is a great list. The top
coming
5
into this,
games.
I was not that passionate about a lot of these games. And still, like, it's really the top 3 are the ones that I'm like actually really, really passionate about. But hey, solid top 5.
Yeah. The top 5 games that don't suck of 1996. Coming in at position number 5, that's Crash Bandicoot. Position number 4, that's the first Resident Evil. Position number 3, Mario Kart 64. Position 2, Twisted Metal 2. And position 1, the top game that doesn't suck, Super Mario 64.
Hell yeah.
Nice job, video games. You did a good one in 96.
So looking back at my Game of the Year lists for every year that I've been alive, for 1996, Super Mario 64 was my number 1 game, obviously.
Okay.
But my runners-up, because I just kind of picked 2 other games, were Twisted Metal 2 and Quake.
Okay.
So this feels good.
Yeah.
I feel like the others on this list are a good entry.
And I feel like at the time, you putting Quake on there was servicing an audience, maybe not necessarily yourself.
Yeah, I think part of my ideology in looking back at like in the format that I did was also about like celebrating the impact of games at the time.
Right.
And so that's part of what made Quake a good fit for that.
Games for impact.
No.
Yuck.
This was before woke culture invaded my video games, man. This was back in the simple days where Duke Nukem could like squeeze some honkin' badonkers and no one canceled him online for it.
I love honkin' badonkers. What about you?
Me too. Yes. Nothing better.
What are they?
Some honkin' badonkers.
You decide, listener. Which we're talking about. You decide. We're not both. A little bit of Zoidberg there to end things. Hey, music, you can start now. Thanks for listening, everybody. You can find the Shea Hates Everything podcast wherever you engage with your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe, leave a rating or a review. Check out the flagship podcast if you don't. That releases on the first Monday of every month, unless Shea gets sick from his kids. And
True.
We'll be following this podcast up with a podcast called Games That Suck 1997 midway through next month. So keep your eyes and ears tuned to your podcast feeds.
If someone wants to contact us, where should they do that, Kyle?
I believe that you can email us at info@sheahateseverything.com. That's info@sheahateseverything.com.
See, when I'm hosting, I always forget. And because you're the host here, you always forget. So
Yeah.
I'm filling your role in reminding you about the email address.
No, I appreciate you. I queued the music, but now it's been too long.
Now
for
it's too long.
The music to have been queued. So I don't know when it happened, but the listeners do. Hey, have a great rest of your week, everybody. We'll see you in a couple.
See you in a couple? That's it. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right.